This is the Terracotta Army, 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago, one of the greatest wonders of the world.
The Terracotta Army has stood as one of history's greatest mysteries for decades, frozen in time beside China's first emperor.
Created to guard China's first emperor, the Terracotta Warriors marked one of the most significant archaeological finds of all time.
But then explorer Albert Lin stepped in with powerful scanning technology that could see beneath the ground without digging it up. His scans exposed hidden chambers, secret layouts, and strange clues. Instead of a defense line meant to protect the emperor, the underground world is far more complex and carefully planned. Now, scientists are rethinking old theories as new digital images reveal shapes and spaces no one had seen before. If they were not just guarding the emperor, then what secret were they really built to protect? Join us as we uncover what truly lies beneath the rows of warriors and why they were actually created in the first place. The Emperor's Immortal Soldiers. About 8,000 life-size clay figures stand buried underground, created more than 2 millennia ago, and known around the world as the Terracotta Army.
The Terracotta Warriors, they're totally exceptional and unique in Chinese history, but that's absolutely not comparable what we find in the first emperor's tomb.
These silent soldiers were placed near the tomb of China's first emperor, not only to protect him, but to guard the greatest secrets of his life and end. In the year 221 BC, the long era of battles between rival states in what would become China finally ended.
We knew very little about the Qin Empire until the Terracotta Army was uncovered. Incredible evidence of what the soldiers wore, what their military technology was like.
For the first time in history, separate kingdoms were brought together under one ruler. A young king rose above his rivals and chose a title for himself, Qin Shi Huang, meaning the first emperor. Under his command, tiny states became a single empire that would shape history. Qin Shi Huang did not rest after winning the wars. He wanted every part of his realm to feel united. He set one system of laws that every person, rich or poor, had to follow. He created a single currency so that merchants and traders could trade without confusion. He also made all people use the same written script so that everyone across his vast land could read and write with the same characters. His orders across the countryside like iron chains tightening around every town and village. Yet, even with all this power, the emperor feared one thing above all: death. He feared the moment that would end his rule. In his mind, death was the greatest enemy. So Qin Shi Huang dispatched ships into distant seas to look for magical islands that might hold the secret of everlasting life. He drank strange mixtures from alchemists, hoping they might stop the years from touching him. But nothing worked. His body grew older, and his dread of dying only increased. From that fear came his greatest plan, the creation of an eternal resting place that would reflect his vision of immortality. The emperor ordered the building of a vast tomb complex near the future city of Xi'an. Records from ancient historians say that hundreds of thousands of people were summoned from all corners of the empire. Farmers were taken from their fields, prisoners were dragged from cells, and skilled craftsmen were forced into service. Together, they began digging a hidden world deep beneath the earth. Work on this underground kingdom continued for decades. Every year, thousands of workers moved mountains of earth, carved vast chambers, and built supporting structures that would hold up the weight of soil above. For nearly 40 years, the effort seemed endless, and those who labored sometimes wondered if the work would ever stop. The tomb was not simple. It was like a city buried beneath the fields. Some chambers were wide, while others were narrow tunnels and hidden spaces, built for purposes that the world would only guess at. Ancient tales describe these rooms as being filled with treasures, underground palaces that cast reflections of heaven and earth. These legends said the entire tomb was meant to mirror the world above, a home where the emperor could continue to rule after he passed away. As the tomb grew, so did its contents. Timber supports were lifted into place beneath the earth, to hold up ceilings. Stone slabs lined the walls to keep them strong. Bronze and iron tools clanged and cracked under the constant hammering of craftsmen who barely rested. As completion neared, treasures began to move into the tomb. Objects the emperor enjoyed in life, gold ornaments, carvings, chariots, weapons, were placed beside him so that he would lack nothing. The site covered an area far larger than most cities of the time, a secret world known only to the emperor and those forced to build it. Then, one day, Qin Shi Huang finally passed away. After he was laid to rest, the tomb was sealed. Passageways were closed with stones, doors were blocked, and the land above was smoothed and shaped, hiding the palace and its mighty army beneath ordinary earth and grass. For more than 2,000 years, the hidden chambers remained untouched, lost to memory. Then, in March 1974, farmers digging a well near Xi'an struck fragments of clay that would change history.
One day, a group of farmers digging well here, and they find some pieces of the pottery.
At first, they thought the pieces were simple pottery, but as more figures were exposed, it became clear that something extraordinary lay beneath. As archaeologists began careful excavation, they uncovered ranks of life-size figures crafted with astonishing detail. These figures were assembled into battle formation, with archers, soldiers, cavalry, and charioteers all arranged as if ready for combat. The faces and expressions of these warriors were not all the same. Each had distinct features that hinted at the individual human identities they once represented. Alongside the clay warriors were relics and remnants of the tomb's larger world. Bronze weapons with sharp points and polished surfaces, wooden chariots that had long since disintegrated, animal figures, and artifacts of daily life. Archaeologists have since uncovered multiple pits of warriors and horses, as well as other figures believed to represent officials, musicians, and attendants. The discovery of the Terracotta Army is counted among the greatest archaeological finds of modern times.
The Terracotta Army site is incredibly important for world archaeology. Majestic it could be, just how incredible it was. And you can look at it and say, wow, ancient China was amazing.
Revealing a hidden world that had slept for centuries beneath the soil. The vast clay forces that once lay silent in their pits now offer the world a glimpse into the life, fears, and ambitions of the first emperor who sought forever. However, that was only a fragment of the secrets it held. Inside the mausoleum complex, local stories around the Terracotta Army often paint a darker picture than the bright museum displays. Many villagers grew up hearing that the emperor's resting place carried a heavy curse. Elders warned children not to go too close, saying anyone who tried to dig up the past might bring misfortune down on themselves. These tales passed down through generations built up fear and mystery, making the burial site feel less like a treasure and more like forbidden ground. The farmers who uncovered the site had their lives quickly turned upside down. Some said officials moved in and took over their farmland, pushing them out of their property. Others claimed sickness followed after the discovery, and rumors spread about strange deaths. While historians explain many changes through social and economic pressure, locals still connect these hardships to warnings that disturbing the emperor's rest would bring consequences that no one could fully understand. Years later, explorer and scientist Albert Lin stepped into this complicated history. Instead of focusing on curses, he tried to break through myths and dig into hidden facts. He felt that the beauty and skill of the clay warriors were only the outer layer of a much bigger story. Standing on the ancient soil, he sensed that thousands of years of human effort and suffering were buried below. To him, the statues looked like guardians covering up secrets waiting to come out. Lin brought advanced technology to help him look beneath the surface without digging everything up. One of his main tools was ground-penetrating radar, a system that sends waves into the soil and picks up signals bouncing back from objects underground. As the radar pulses moved through layers of dirt, they built up digital images showing shapes hidden from normal sight. When these new maps started to appear on the monitors, the research team leaned closer, slowly taking in patterns that no one had seen before. The radar images revealed underground structures that did not match any known drawings of the tomb complex. Researchers saw long walls stretching out beyond expected borders and deep shafts dropping far into the earth. Some openings looked more than 30 meters deep, which suggested large-scale planning rather than random digging. In several spots, the scans picked up dense clusters of small shapes packed tightly together. Because the signals were unclear, no one could immediately identify what they were. As the scans pushed deeper into the soil layers, the patterns began to look less organized. The ground appeared uneven, showing places where large numbers of items could have been placed together quickly. Researchers noticed irregular shapes that did not follow neat architectural lines, which raised questions about how certain areas were used. While science cannot confirm every story, these findings supported ancient records that described heavy labor during the tomb's long construction period. For decades, strict rules limited aerial views over the mausoleum area because of its cultural importance and ongoing research. But luckily, Lin received rare permission to send specialized drones into the air. These flying cameras helped him map the landscape from above without damaging the fragile ground. As the drones moved back and forth, they collected thousands of images that researchers stitched together, building up a clearer view of the massive burial complex and the hidden patterns that spread far beyond the famous pits. From the sky, the site looked much larger and more complex than visitors could imagine while standing on the ground. Rows of clay warriors were only a small part of a vast network buried beneath fields and hills. Straight lines, geometric shapes, and unusual formations appeared in the aerial maps, showing how carefully the underground world had been planned. This suggested entire sections of the complex that had never been fully explored, including corridors, storage zones, and likely ceremonial spaces waiting below. Lin also relied on LiDAR technology, which sends out laser pulses to measure the shape of land and objects. By stripping away trees and surface features from the digital images, LiDAR helped researchers pick out hidden structures just beneath the soil. In some places, the scan revealed signs of intense heat appeared, suggesting ancient fires or industrial activity, possibly from metalwork, pottery production, or events connected to the tomb's construction. One of the most disturbing discoveries came from deep under the clay soldiers' feet. The data showed groups of holes and disturbed earth that looked similar to known mass grave sites from other historical locations. The soil in those areas appeared broken and scarred, with cracks that hinted at violent events or rushed burials. Some shapes even resembled scattered bones. These findings show how deeply Qin Shi Huang tried to lock away his most guarded secrets, but not without a price. The fatal cost. At first, historians only knew about the army of terracotta warriors.
For the past half a century, an ancient army of warriors has been quietly conquering the world.
Horses and chariots meant to protect the emperor after his demise. They knew that the massive burial complex had taken a huge workforce to build, possibly around 700,000 people over decades. But many researchers also believed that some of the people who worked on the mausoleum might have been buried nearby when they lost their lives during the long years of construction. As the new scanning technology started to light up images from far below the surface, patterns kept showing up beneath different sections of the pits where the warriors stand. It was not just one small grave. In several areas, there were clusters of shapes consistent with burial spots, and experts realized these were not part of the planned tomb chambers, but separate places where people might have been buried. This matched earlier archaeological finds of ordinary graves of workers and prisoners near the tomb area, found in places within a few kilometers of the main complex. Some old writings from Chinese historian Sima Qian, who lived long after the emperor's time, said that the people who knew the deepest secrets of the tomb were not allowed to leave once they saw inside. He wrote that workers and assistants were held captive inside. so they could not talk about what they knew. While those ancient accounts are hard to prove exactly, they hint at a fear of information spreading that may have led to harsh treatment of workers. In scanning beneath the main pits of the Terracotta Army, researchers have also noticed underground gaps and chambers that no one expected. Some of these spaces appear to be tunnels running far below the surface, deeper and more extensive than previously recorded. Because historical texts do not describe so many underground passages, these spaces remain mysterious. Some might connect distant parts of the tomb complex that no one has yet reached, while others may have fallen in or been closed off long ago. Using special imaging, scientists have also found impressions in the earth that seem like the last movements of people before the ground hardened around them. Every layer that archaeologists peeled back in the imaging made the story feel less peaceful and more intense. The underground world beneath the Terracotta warriors was not just a quiet resting place for an emperor. It was a place built through long years of work, hardship, and human effort, and the ground itself seemed full of signs of that toil and struggle. At the Liyi and Shanren burial sites connected to the mausoleum, archaeologists found skeletons that showed signs of hard lives and sometimes restraints, which aligns with the idea that some laborers were prisoners or under punishment. These people likely came from different regions and social backgrounds, and the way they were buried points to their roles as laborers rather than honored figures. Because the emperor's tomb itself has never been opened fully by archaeologists, much of what lies below the main mound is still only guessed at through remote sensing and indirect evidence. But even in the areas that have been scanned, the sheer size of the burial complex and the network of buried chambers show that the emperor's afterlife world was meant to contain more than just art and symbols. It was meant to hold real human lives in ways that are still being uncovered. Some people have suggested that the workers' bodies might have once been used as inspiration or reference when crafting the terracotta figures, though there is no scientific proof that any human remains were mixed into the clay itself. But the closeness of burial sites to the pits with clay warriors raises questions about how the living and the dead were seen in ancient times, and what roles people were expected to play in the life after death. The narrow underground hallways mapped by remote imaging sometimes show straight lines leading toward the center of the tomb area. In some scans, these routes look like paths that people could have used to move deep beneath the ground toward the emperor's resting place. While no one can know for sure whether people were trying to flee or were guided deeper into the earth, the patterns suggest that the underground world was active with human passage at some point. All these discoveries together paint a picture of the mausoleum that is not just about the terracotta soldiers, but about the many hands that shaped, carried, dug, and placed each part. The earth beneath the army holds the marks of human lives, and as scientists use more advanced tools to dig into the dirt without disturbing the ground, the silent stories of those buried beneath continue to come to light. Meanwhile, there's more to the story than the emperor's cruelty. A royal betrayal. Beneath the ordered maze of underground rooms and narrow tunnels, researchers found one deep shaft that stood out from everything around it. The soil layers showed that it had been dug earlier than nearby chambers, then covered up as the complex grew larger. It dropped down farther than most known graves, as if someone had tried to hide it under later construction. The shape did not match the planned burial layout, which made scientists slow down and carefully study what rested inside. When the team examined the images and later reports from excavation studies around the mausoleum area, they realized the burial inside this shaft was very different from common worker graves found nearby. Other burial pits often held several bodies placed quickly during heavy construction periods. This grave held only one person. The skeleton had been laid out in a balanced, almost respectful way, suggesting that whoever was placed there was treated with care, compared to other laborers buried around the complex. Tests on the bones suggested the person was a young adult male, likely in his early 20s. His height and build showed signs of a life that may not have involved heavy physical labor. What made the researchers stop and look closer was the injury in his skull. A bronze arrowhead remained lodged deep in the bone. Bronze weapons were common during the Qin dynasty, and arrows were used both in war and in executions, which raised serious questions about the way this young man met his end. The wound showed clear signs of force from close range, not a hunting accident or battlefield injury. Archaeologists studying Qin burial practices know that executions were common during times of political change. Also, the arrow placement suggested a direct and deliberate act. Once experts confirmed that the wound happened around the time of demise, attention shifted toward discovering who this young man might have been and why he was placed so far beneath the emperor's burial grounds. Ancient historian Sima Qian wrote detailed accounts about the Qin royal family and court politics. His records mention that several sons of Qin Shi Huang vanished from official history soon after the emperor passed away. Some princes were caught up in struggles for power when the empire passed to a new ruler. Though his writings were created years later, they remain one of the main sources describing possible purges within the royal family, where brothers and sisters disappeared without clear explanation. When researchers studied the objects placed around the skeleton, they noticed signs that this person may have held a high position. Fragments of fine materials and decorative items found in similar royal graves suggested wealth and status. This stood in contrast to worker burials that contained almost nothing except simple clothing remains. The grave's deep and hidden location also supported the idea that the person was important, making the burial feel more like a secret chamber than a normal resting place. The structure of the space around the skeleton added another layer of mystery. The walls were narrow and straight, more like a small holding room than a peaceful tomb. Some experts suggested that the young man might have been kept there before his passing. Stress marks found on bones in similar Qin-era prisoners show how confinement could affect the body. Though direct proof is limited, the cramped layout hinted that the person may have spent time alive within that stone chamber before being buried. As researchers compared this grave with other voids detected by remote sensing tools around the mausoleum mound, they found several small, deep spaces with similar shapes. These features were too small to be major tomb chambers, but too organized to be ordinary holes. The pattern made historians think about possible royal burials hidden near the emperor's resting place. Some believe these spaces might belong to other members of the royal family who were removed during the violent transition after Qin Shi Huang's passing. Historical sources describe how Qin Ershi, the emperor's successor, faced intense political pressure. Some accounts claim he eliminated rivals within the family to secure power, though details remain debated among historians. If true, these hidden graves near the mausoleum could belong to princes or princesses seen as threats. The idea that royal family members were buried near common workers shows how political fear may have erased social differences once a person was seen as dangerous to the new ruler. Another theory connects the burial to ritual beliefs about protecting the emperor in the afterlife. Ancient Chinese rulers sometimes included real attendants in tomb complexes, though this practice had mostly faded by the Qin dynasty. Some scholars have suggested that a young royal relative might have been placed near the tomb as a spiritual guardian. The arrow wound could then represent a ritual act meant to bind the person's spirit to the emperor's eternal service, though this idea remains controversial. Scientific study of the bones showed signs of physical stress, including small changes in bone growth that might come from long periods of anxiety or limited movement. Coupled with the narrow chamber and hidden placement, the evidence paints a picture of someone whose end was planned. The deeper researchers look into the mausoleum complex, the more they uncover stories of political tension, fear, and control buried beneath its grand design. But what about the main tomb, where the emperor was buried? What's inside? The deadly secrets of the main tomb. Deep inside sealed rooms close to the emperor's main burial area, experts opened up spaces that had been locked away for over 2,000 years. Behind thick walls and packed dirt, they came across piles of bamboo scrolls that should have fallen apart long ago. These old strips of bamboo had once been tied together to form books. Because the air and moisture could quickly destroy them, the experts had to set up special rooms with controlled temperature and humidity before they could even begin to roll them out and read what was written. As the team slowly opened the scrolls, they started to read stories that revealed how deeply the emperor feared not only death, but also the living people around him. The words were not simple lists of rules or building records. Instead, many parts sounded like warnings, punishments, and personal thoughts that felt almost like confessions. Line by line, the writings described a kingdom where fear was used to keep order, and where even the smallest doubt toward the ruler could lead to severe consequences. Some of the scrolls matched other writings already found from the Qin dynasty period, which helped historians confirm they were real records from that time. They told stories about harsh laws and strict control over the empire. One terrifying passage described how the emperor ordered hundreds of scholars to be punished severely for disagreeing with him. Ancient historical texts, like those written by Sima Qian, also mentioned that about 460 scholars were executed after being accused of spreading dangerous ideas that challenged the emperor's authority. Other scrolls described orders to gather up books from across the land and burn them. The goal was to wipe out teachings that might cause people to question the emperor's rule or remember earlier traditions. Historians already knew about these events from ancient writings, but seeing similar records on bamboo strips inside the tomb area made the history feel more realistic and personal. It showed how knowledge itself was treated as something dangerous when it stood against the ruler's control. Among the most disturbing writings were signed statements from engineers and workers who helped build the tomb. These looked like forced confessions. The crimes written beside their names were often unclear or minor, such as working too slowly, making mistakes, or speaking badly about the emperor. The scrolls suggested that everyone working on the massive construction project was watched closely every day, and a single error could bring serious punishment or even worse. As historians continued to read through the texts, they began to rethink how they viewed the first emperor. For many years, people praised him for unifying China, standardizing writing and money, and beginning large construction projects like early versions of the Great Wall and the Terracotta Army.
And the world-famous Chinese terracotta warriors will be on display in Perth over the next 8 months.
But these scrolls showed another side, a ruler who was deeply suspicious of others and who worked hard to control every thought and action inside his empire. Albert Lin stood quietly as the translations were read out loud. The meaning of the clay soldiers seemed to change as he listened. Instead of just being beautiful works of art or proud symbols of loyalty, the rows of figures started to feel like a powerful system meant to keep order even in the afterlife. The soldiers no longer looked like simple guards. They felt more like a lasting force designed to watch over a place built through suffering and fear. There were also strange passages written in symbolic language that were difficult to translate. Some sections described clay figures coming to life through breath or spirit, which led some readers to believe the emperor may have thought his army could truly awaken one day. While modern experts see these as symbolic religious ideas rather than literal instructions, they show how strongly the emperor believed in magic, rituals, and supernatural protection. One part of the scrolls mentioned a hidden chamber filled with gold, jade, and priceless objects. Modern scans of the tomb complex have shown large empty spaces under the main mound, including a huge chamber estimated to be several stories tall. Some researchers believe this might be the treasure room described in the writings, though it has never been opened. The scrolls warned that the treasure was surrounded by poison of the stars, which scholars believe is a poetic way to describe Mercury. Scientific tests of the soil around the emperor's tomb have found extremely high mercury levels, far above normal natural amounts. Ancient texts describe rivers of liquid mercury flowing around a model of the emperor's palace inside the sealed tomb. For many years, historians thought these were exaggerations, but modern measurements suggest that mercury really was used in large quantities inside the burial complex. Because mercury is extremely poisonous, opening the main tomb today could be dangerous. Toxic vapors trapped for thousands of years might rush out if the chamber were broken open. There is also a risk that pressure changes could damage delicate structures inside. Experts remember what happened in the 1980s, when smaller pits of painted warriors were opened. As soon as fresh air touched them, the bright colors began to peel away within minutes, destroying details that had survived for centuries underground. If the emperor's main tomb contains wooden buildings, silk banners, or detailed paintings, which ancient texts suggest it might, opening it too soon could ruin priceless history in seconds. Modern technology still struggles to preserve materials that have been sealed in perfect conditions for over 2,000 years. This is one of the main reasons the central chamber remains untouched today. The emperor went to extreme lengths to protect his final resting place, whether through fear, careful planning, or both. He designed a tomb that no one has dared to open. And even now, thousands of years later, the world continues to stay outside those sealed walls, not because of respect alone, but because of the very real danger waiting inside. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.